Hello everyone and welcome to a truly spectacular game that was played in the Charlotte Fall Invitational Tournament where young international masters were invited to try and get their Grandmaster norms, and it's a game between Abhimanyu Mishra and Hans Niemann. Now, I have not seen this game prior to yesterday. I've seen it in a video by Yosha Iglesias. If you haven't seen her video, do check it out. I will put a link to it in the description below. She made a very nice compilation of all of the games that Hans Niemann played. Not all of them, but the more incriminating ones. And what I found interesting is that she titled the video "The Most Incriminating Evidence Against Hans Niemann." Now, English is only my second language, so I was very much interested in what is the, well, basically what's the difference between evidence and proof. And well, if you check the dictionary really quickly, you will get this. Let me just check. I have it somewhere. Yeah, you will have this basically. So this is what I found. What is the difference between evidence and proof? So basically what it says, sorry, it takes a bit longer to set it up. What is the difference between evidence and proof? And it says that proof is the final verdict that removes all doubts, whereas evidence only leads one in the direction of a fact or statement. Now, it's a very interesting definition because, okay, you have proof, you have proof. I mean, you have the smoking gun, but if you have evidence, it leads one into a direction, but it could also lead one into a wrong direction. So just something to keep in mind. So, I mean, it's a very nice video and I really enjoyed it, but it does not really prove anything. So it's very easy to jump on the bandwagon and, you know, become part of a witch hunt. But what I'm interested in is only the truth and what actually happened. Now, well, this is not something that we will probably find out anytime soon. It's probably gonna take a while. I did, while watching her video, run into this spectacular game. So Abhimanyu Mishra, the youngest grandmaster ever. Don't be fooled by his young appearance. He's an incredible beast. He became a grandmaster at this game was played. He was 11 when it was played. He became a grandmaster before Bobby Fischer, before Magnus Carlsen, and of course before the person who held the record for the youngest grandmaster at the time, Sergei Karyakin. And the game is truly remarkable. It really resembles something you would see in a game of a very, very strong engine, much like, for example, AlphaZero, if you remember that game, where AlphaZero trapped the queen, his queen on purpose, and then, I mean, there was just nothing to do for Stockfish. Now, let's check out the game, enjoy it. I do feel like this is the best game I've seen Hans play. And then we are going to discuss what they played, why they played it, and what is the, what is the strength of the moves they have played, if you ask our good friend the engine. So let's check it out. Mishra has the white pieces and he opens with pawn to e4. We have pawn to e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, and now bishop to c4. Mishra goes for the Italian game. Knight to f6, we have the two knights defense by Hans, and now d3. We have h6, so nothing new here, c3, d6, and now Mishra castles. And here we have g5 by Hans. g6 is a bit more popular. g5, I feel, is more appealing to younger players. Knight b to d2, and now usually bishop to g7 is played here, but Hans goes for the immediate g4, and it's a very, very interesting game that arises. Now, there is one game where knight to h4 was played, and it is the absolute correct move that should be played, if you ask our good friend the engine. Here, knight to e1 by Mishra only. Maybe the engine prefers knight to h4 slightly better, or slightly more than knight to e1. But okay, it is now, as of move 8, that we have a completely new game. So Hans continues to push pawn to h5. We have f4 by Mishra, and now e captures on f4. You could also consider g captures on f3, but after queen captures, anyone who ever played the King's Gambit knows that this is very good for white. So after f4, we have e captures on f4, and now rook captures on f4. We have bishop to h6 by Mishra, attacking the rook, and just rook back, by Hans, and rook to f1 by Mishra. We have queen to e7, and now knight to b3, preparing to bring the knight to d4. We have knight to e5, now attacking the bishop, and here Abhimanyu plays bishop captures on h6. Of course, he wants to get rid of this bishop controlling this nice diagonal. Rook captures, and now plays knight to d2. Now, this is a very important move for how this game will continue. I will show after the game why also knight to d4 can be played. But okay, knight to d2, defending the bishop here. You don't want your pawn structure to get messed up. And now Hans plays bishop to d7. And okay, he wants the castle queenside. We have bishop to b3. Abimanyu now doesn't allow the bishop to be captured, and pawn to g3. This allows Abi to play h3 and not allow opening of the king side, but also this pawn is now incredibly strong. Guarding h2 and f2. We have knight f to g4. Seems like, okay, you're maybe giving up a knight, but not really. If you actually accept this, then there's no defending this position with black. I mean, there's so many things to worry about. Even to give you an example, if a silly move is played, just rook h1 check and it's game over. The king has to capture, queen checks, king here and queen to h2 will be checkmate. So the knight is there to stay. So here we have queen to e2, developing the queen, also defending the d3 pawn, so the knight can move. And now knight to h2, attacking the rook, and there really is no good square for this rook. We have queen to e3, attacking this rook, so offering a rook trade, but Hans just moves the rook back, rook to h7. It is the absolute best move, as the f7 pawn, of course, has to be protected. So here we have rook to f4. Also to be considered is rook to f5, as the rook really does not have any squares, as you'll see. Even f4 is not safe for the rook. So rook to f4, h4 by Hans, now guarding the g3 pawn, and now pawn to d4, chasing away the knight, knight to g6, and now the rook must be captured, as there are no squares. So here, knight to d3 by Mishra, and now Hans just castles queenside. There's no point in rushing the rook capture, there's no square for the rook. So here, rook to e1, we have rook to e8, and now pawn to e5. And now, okay, the pawn, the rook must be captured, because Abimanyu will play rook to e4, and then black will be in trouble. So here Hans captures, knight captures on f4, knight captures on f4, and now pawn to c6, taking away the d5 square from Abimanyu's pieces. Knight to c4 now, as the d6 square has been weakened, so of course he wants to attack that, and now pawn to d5. Inviting the knight to d6, but this is exactly what Hans wants, and this is also one of the reasons I really thoroughly enjoy this game. So knight to d6, and now Hans plays the only move for black that keeps advantage. Queen captures on d6, trading queens here. E captures on d6, rook captures on e3, rook captures on e3, and now just a rook to h6, seemingly going after the d6 pawn, because why not? And here there's really no good move for white to play. Mishra plays the absolute best move, but it's still not enough. He plays knight to e2. His idea is, of course, that he wants to capture on g3, h captures, rook captures, and then the knight will be undefended. He will win back his piece, but also grab the two pawns. But there is a problem here. So feel free to pause the video and try to find what Hans played here, as it's truly an incredible revelation. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting this incredible brilliancy. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is rook to e6, not capturing the pawn, because if you capture the pawn, like we said, then just knight captures on g3, h captures, rook captures, and then the knight will fall as well, and there's really no good way to play this. For example, rook f6, you're going to capture the knight, and if rook f2 going after the b2 pawn, you just start marching the h pawn up the board. You can even threaten the f pawn, and if bishop defends it, now you play h4, and black is never in time to grab the pawn. If black grabs the pawn, h5, h6, and at some point black will have to give up the bishop for the pawn. So after knight to e2, Hans played the incredible rook to e6, and now you realize the horror of Abimanyu's position. The rooks must be traded, of course. There's no way to defend the rook, and now after rook captures on e6 and bishop captures on e6, you realize what is actually happening here. It's not Hans's knight that's trapped on h2, it's actually Abimanyu's king that is trapped on g1. So while Hans will play some part of the game without the knight, Abimanyu will play pretty much the rest of the game without a king, as the pawn covers f2, the knight covers f1, the king cannot enter the endgame. And what is the most important and strongest piece of the endgame? Of course, it is the marching king. So here Abi plays bishop to c2, we have king to d7. Now Hans starts marching his king into the game. Knight to f4, king captures on d6. We have pawn to b4 and pawn to b5. We have pawn to a4 and just b captures on a4. Bishop captures, and now bishop to f5. The idea is that at some point, of course, Abhimanyu will have to play something. The bishop will come to d3, guard the f1 square, and then the knight will be introduced back into the game. The light square bishop can do this from any diagonal. You could also put it on this diagonal. It's important to keep an eye on the f1 square. So here, bishop to b3. We have bishop to e6, and now bishop to a4. Abhimanyu repeats the position, but Hans now shows that there is a way to exploit the diagonal. Bishop to c8, we have bishop to d1, of course hoping for bishop to e2, but now just bishop to a6. And now there is no good way to do it, and of course Abhimanyu wants to stop knight to f1, so he plays bishop to e2 and offers a trade of bishops. A more resilient way to play this, but even with that it's hard to say if it would be enough, is bishop h5, going after the pawn, allowing knight to f1, and then after bishop captures on f7, king e7, and after bishop h5, knight to e3. So whether it's possible to survive this with white, it's hard to say, because bishop to f1 is coming. You're going to start gobbling up these pawns, or the knight will have to remain here. It's a very, very hard position to even find the move for white. Of course, if you try to go for a pawn, just king f6, and now of course the pawn cannot be captured because king g5 attacks the knight and the bishop. So it's an incredibly difficult position for white. So while maybe it's possible to save it, it's hard to say. Abhimanyu plays bishop to e2. He offers a trade of bishops. Bishop captures on e2, knight captures on e2, and now just king to e6. You could also get the king into the game via the queen side. Also possible is to just get the king to c4, knight to c1 now, knight to c1 now, king to f5, and now knight to b3. We have king to e4, and now knight to a5, going after c6 and a7, but Hans plays it perfectly. Of course, not king d3, but rather pawn to f5. This is the forcing line, f4, f3, f2. White will have to play captures at some point. So knight captures on c6. We have f4 by Hans, b5 now, preparing to capture and escort the b pawn up the board, but now pawn to f3, and you cannot allow f2 check. If you allow f2 check, king h1, f1 will be checkmate. So g captures on f3, knight captures with check, king f1, and now the only winning move, knight to g5, going after the h3 pawn, and of course king g2 is impossible. If you play king to g2, then look at this, knight to e6, going after this check, and even after knight captures on a7, knight f4 check, king to g1, king f3, for example b6, g2, b7, there's knight to e2 check, and of course now you get checkmate at h2, and g1 queen is checkmate. So after knight g5, knight to e5 by Abhimanyu. This is again the absolute best way to try and defend. Knight captures on h3. Now we have knight to g6 going after the pawn, but just g2 check. Beautifully played by Hans, forcing the game into a king and pawn endgame. The knights are now coming off the board. You have to capture, otherwise g1 is queen. So king captures, knight to f4 check, forcing a trade of knights. Knight captures, king captures, and look at this, equal material, but Hans is completely winning here because the past h pawn is too strong. Of course, Mishra has to deal with it. So king h3, and now Hans simply marches his king to the other side of the board to gobble up all of the pawns. King to e4, king captures on h4, king d3, king to g4, king captures on c3, king to f5, king captures on d4, king to e6, and now king to c5, and it was in this position on move 56 that Abhimanyu Mishra resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. Once you make a move, let's say any move, just king captures on b5, and after king captures, you just escort the a pawn up the board. If the white king tries to stop it, you just counter the white king. You always create opposition, king b3, king d2, king b2, and now the pawn is safely escorted while the white king is completely blocked away from ever reaching that pawn. So yeah, after king to c5, Abhimanyu resigned the game, and yeah, this is one truly spectacular game. I mean, just trapping your own knight on h2 like this is such a positional masterpiece. I mean, and already happening on move 17. Of course, you realize that you will probably win that rook, but still, once this rook runs away, the knight is trapped there. Basically, Hans is playing without a piece, but Abhimanyu is playing without a piece, but then Hans just showed that it's actually white who is playing without a king after he played this beautiful rook to e6, forcing a rook trade. But even if Abhimanyu doesn't play this knight to e2 move, there's no good move for you to play. If you allow rook to f6, then the knight is stuck there for the rest of the game because of the rook to f1 checkmate threat. So you cannot allow this. I mean, you absolutely have to play knight to e2 to oppose this, because then, of course, an idea like rook to f6 is met by just knight captures on g3. That's the whole point. H captures, rook captures, and the knight gets taken off the board. So while it loses the game, Abhimanyu in fact played the absolute best move. So while it's interesting, of course, you guys are now very much interested in how many of Hans's moves were top engine moves and how many of them were second top engine moves. Pretty much all of them were top engine moves and top second engine moves, but guess what? So are Abhimanyu's. So basically all of them. I mean, the two of them played a perfect game. It was only a slight imprecision by Abhimanyu that allowed this masterpiece to happen from Hans, and it's very hard to really pin it down. I mentioned this knight to d2 maneuver that Mishra played, trying to guard this bishop, and I said that maybe better was knight to d4. Point being that you can never ruin white structure, because if knight captures, just queen to a4 check wins back the knight, so it's perfectly fine for white. So let's say knight to d4, and then after g3 you will play knight to f3, and after g captures on h2, king to h1, and it's a very, very nice position for white. White has a very good game, a lot of pressure along the f file. The knight can come to f5 at any point, so queen a4 check always a resource. So it's a very nice position, and it's one that could have happened. And the only other basically imprecision that Abhimanyu played was maybe this offer of a bishop. Maybe bishop to h5 is stronger, but still it's hard to say if you could handle this game. So while yes, Hans played many top engine moves and many top second engine moves and third engine moves, so did Abhimanyu. I mean, they played literally the perfect game. Only Abhimanyu made a slight imprecision in maybe a move or two, and Hans took advantage of that just beautifully. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Really wonderfully played. I mean, this is why I love chess. I mean, games like these where you voluntarily trap a knight for like 20 moves and then just show that the knight was never really trapped. It was in fact the white king that was trapped. I mean, truly a remarkable maneuver. So yeah, if you guys still haven't, do watch Joshua Iglesias' video. It's already been watched by a lot of people, has like over 300,000 views, but do check it out, do watch it, and let me know what you think about it. Is the data truly that incriminating, or is it maybe still open to interpretation? I'm very interested in what you guys think. So yeah, that's the game. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I immensely enjoyed it. So I mean, hopefully we have many more games like these in the future. I would like to thank Anshuman Shukla, Henry Spraggins, Mr. Robert D. Crayon, Saurav Medrata, and Michael Ovens for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.